Hello everyone, welcome to V2B Academy and I welcome you all to the discussion on carbon border adjustment mechanism and the BRICS backlash. So this particular topic will be important for you for the international relations part as well as it is important for you for the environment part of GS-3. Okay, so basically what I wanted to tell you is it is important for both GS2 and GS3. So watch till the end so that you will have an analysis, a clear understanding of this particular topic. Okay. So, what is this particular CBAM? CBAM stands for Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. So, European Union, in order to achieve its net zero climate goal by 2050, it has introduced a mechanism called as Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. So, this will address the carbon leakage from that particular economy. Okay, for example, if we are exporting anything if India is exporting anything, for example, steel or cement or aluminium, if we are exporting to European Union, they'll impose a lot of tariffs on us because these industries in India will have some kind of impact on the environment. So we will release a lot of carbon dioxide while producing these particular products. So this tariff is as part of CBAM mechanism. So they are adjusting the carbon leakage in order to address the carbon leakage into the environment. So they want to shift towards the shift from the carbon intensive industries to the climate friendly industries. So to do that and to achieve their climate goal, they have introduced this particular model called as CBAM, that is Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. So through this CBAM, they'll impose lot of environmental tariffs on carbon intensive imports. For example, if any country is exporting or importing to the European Union, the steel, cement and any other carbon intensive sector like aluminium, fertilizers, electricity or hydrogen, they will start imposing tariffs on that particular country. So they want to actually create the carbon free economy. Okay, so it's the aim of them is to play the level playing field for European Union domestic industries. So basically they want to make their industries, the domestic industries, competing. So to do that, they are imposing carbon tariffs on the countries which are importing to their particular country. Okay, so this is as part of EU's emission trading system. Okay, so they will as part of this particular system, they'll impose equivalent carbon costs on whatever the carbon intensive imports they are importing to their particular country. Okay, so while this particular carbon border adjustment mechanism was actually criticized by the BRICS countries recently when they met. So BRICS countries are Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. They have actually ignited the sharp criticism against this particular CBAM mechanisms. So they have labeled this particular mechanism as unilateral, and also this is discriminatory against this is discriminatory as per the provisions of WTO, and these are more of protectionist policy. Okay, so they have criticized this CBAM mechanism. If you look at the evolution and the legal structure of the CBAM, its origin was in European Union's European Green Deal and ETS. Okay, so this was a policy as an extension of European Green Deal, which was bought by European Union in 2019, and ETS, which is known as Union's emission trading system. As part of this particular two, as an extension of this particular two policies, this CBAM was bought. So this ETS will impose some carbon pricing on the domestic firms. CBAM is intended to close this loophole of the carbon leakage that undermines the European Union's carbon goal. So they want to achieve their carbon targets by 2050. To do that, they have introduced this particular mechanism of CBAM. So what is the legal backing to it? Okay, is there any legal backing? So it is grounded under the Article 192 of Treaty on Functioning of the European Union. So as per Article 192, this CBAM power was granted to them. So and also in 2023, regulation of EU has formally adopted this particular CBAM mechanism on May 10th, 2023. So initial targets were high carbon emission sectors and the trade exposure was there on them. Okay, so but is there any WTO alignment? Is there any WTO principles supporting this particular mechanism? Let's see. EU is claiming that CBAM is according to the WTO principle itself. It is citing that the GATT principles, okay, principles of like product and non-discrimination will support the CBAM mechanism is something which the European Union is always claiming. Okay, it is telling that our CBAM mechanism is a WTO complaint only. Okay. To this particular mechanism, they'll offer credit for carbon taxes which are already paid in the exporting countries. But this CBAM poses threats to the countries who actually exports the carbon intensive sector products to the European Union, which will cause the problem to the economy of those countries who are actually exporting to that particular part, right? So what is the working mechanism of the CBAM? There are different phases. For the first phase is the transitional phase. So importers only report the embedded carbon without financial transaction. In the definitive phase, that is which starts from 2026, importers must purchase and surrender CBAM certificates equal to carbon emission in the goods. So for example, if you are emitting certain units of carbon, equal to that you need to purchase the CBAM certificates, so that you will, in that way you are paying the taxes to the European Union. Okay, this is the definitive phase. This will start from 2026. And the third phase is the pricing phase, in which the CBAM certificate price mirrors the weekly average price of European Union ETO's allowances. And the fourth stage is the credit mechanism phase. So this will lead to the deduction for the carbon price which are already paid in the exporting countries. So basically you don't need to remember the inner lines of this particular CBAM, but you need to remember that there are 4 phases. So the traditional phase has started from 2023 to 2025, where importers only report embedded carbon without any financial transactions. So for example, if we are importing any steel product, we'll tell the European Union that, we'll report to the European Union that so this particular product contains this many units of so and so units of the carbon. In the definitive phase, okay, basically in the transitional phase, so there won't be any financial transaction that happens, but in the definitive phase we'll start actually purchasing the CBAM certificates which are equivalent to the units that we are emitting into the environment while producing that particular respective product. Okay, the third stage is the pricing stage, and the fourth stage is the credit mechanism phase. So basically we are in the transitional phase. From the next year we'll move to definitive phase. Okay. What is EU's justification for CBAM then? What is EU, that is European Union, telling to justify CBAM mechanism? It is telling that in order to prevent the carbon leakage, in order to reduce the carbon emission, these kind of tariffs are imposed, these kind of mechanism was bought in order to meet the carbon, okay, in order to support the renewable sectors, in order to support the lesser emissions into the environment. We have bought this particular thing. Okay, so to prevent the carbon leakage, we have bought this particular phenomena. This is the first justification it provides. Second justification it provides is preserving industrial competitiveness. So EU's European Union industries are under the obligation of ETS, okay, because of which they will have the lot of production costs. So if the outsiders are importing to that particular country, definitely the outsider price product will be very, very less. So that will hit the domestic industries of the European Union. In order to preserve the industrial competitiveness and in order to favor the interests of the domestic companies, they are imposing the tariffs on the companies which are importing to that particular country. Okay, so this is the second one. The third one is market-based environmental diplomacy. So by pricing carbon in the imports, CBAM will pressurize the third countries to adopt the green production. For example, European Union, if it is imposing any kind of tariffs on the our Indian products, definitely will make sure that to come up with the greener products to cut off the emissions. We'll try to reduce the carbon emissions and we'll try to follow our carbon targets. So in this way, this is a market-based environmental diplomacy that they are providing as a justification for the CBAM. Okay. But why is BRICS opposing this particular phenomena? Okay, so BRICS nations are viewing that CBAM is a coercive one. Okay, so this is a unilateral decision that was taken by it and it is against the WTO principle. So this is something which BRICS nations are saying. So the first objection is they are telling that it is against the CBDR-RC. Okay, so CBAM violates something called as common but differentiated responsibilities. So basically in Paris Agreement, okay, in Paris Agreement we have come up with something called as common but differentiated responsibilities. It means that there are two set of countries in the world, right? One is developed nations and the second one is the developing and the third world nations. Okay, so the two sets of countries are there in India, in the world, I'm sorry. So the developed nations are the one who are responsible for the carbon emissions that are there in the environment now, because these countries became developed countries only because of the industrialization process. So these are the historical contributors for the greenhouse gas emissions that are there in the environment. So they always say that, so the developing countries always say that you are the one who emitted the emissions, you are the one who is responsible for the global warming that is happening till now. That is why, as we are actually transitioning from developing to the developed stage, it is you who need to take the responsibility of cutting down this particular emission. It is you who need to pay for the laws that you have created for the environment. So this particular phenomena is nothing but common but differentiated responsibility. So the common aim is to cut down the emissions and to make the environmental friendly policies, but each countries, two sets of the countries will have a differentiated responsibilities. So the developed nations will have a responsibility of providing finance to the developing countries so that they can adopt the climate friendly measures, and developing nations will have a responsibility to take the amount that is given by developed nations and to follow the climate friendly measures. So but European Union's agenda of CBAM will violate this particular principle, because European Union comes under the category of developed countries. So if it is adopting such measures which are not in favor of the developing nations, definitely it is actually violating the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. Okay. So the second criticism that they're coming up with, the climate protectionism. So CBAM is seen as a climate trade barrier. So this will shelter the European Union industries while it will hurt the global south industries. So whatever the exports that we are doing from India or any global south country to European Union, so that the tariffs that they are posing as part of CBAM will hurt our industries. So that is another kind of criticism that we are actually viewing upon the CBAM. And the next one is unilateralism. So they are imposing without any international consensus. So there was no consensus oriented decision making that happened with respect to CBAM. So that is another kind of issue that we have. And the fourth one is trade distortions. So this will definitely add cost to the BRICS exports. So whatever the BRICS country export to that particular European Union, definitely it will have an impact on our economy. So that will lead to the trade distortion. So that is the another criticism that we are coming up with. Next one is economic inequality. So this economic inequity means that developing nations are already facing lack of access to the green technology, climate finance, and clean energy transition. So we don't have technology to fully adapt or to fully come up with a greener version of the production. So if you are imposing CBAM kind of taxes or tariffs on the developing countries, this will create further stress to them. Okay, instead of adopting to the greener technology, their economies will hurt further. Definitely this will lead to more climate emissions. Okay, more carbon emissions in the future that will hurt the climate and the environment too. Okay, so what are the country specific concerns then? For example, if you take India, around 20 to 40% of the steel exports can be impacted if the CBAM is imposed. Okay, that is the concern that the India is showing. So Indian government is flagging that this is a disguised tariff. Okay, so that definitely it needed to be excluded, it needed to be re-looked upon. Okay, we need to come up with a consensus oriented decision making is something which India is arguing. And China is telling that, so China has accused European Union of green unilateralism. So you have taken the decision unilaterally, which is against the multilateral principles and which is against the principles of WTO. Brazil and South Africa are warning agriculture and industrial laws because of the CBAM, and they are asking for the justification and they are asking from the justice with respect to the vulnerable nations. And Russia is actually is having a concern of eco-imperialism. Okay, it is also accusing the European Union for the geopolitical weaponization that it is coming up with. Okay, but there are so many strategic and legal implications because of the CBAM. First one is the diplomatic fallout. So CBAM can become a flashpoint in the World Trade Organization discussions and UNFCCC discussions and negotiations. Definitely this can become a diplomatic fallout. So already we know BRICS countries are coming up with the criticism. They are showing their counter narrative against the green unilateralism that the countries are coming up with. And next one is trade realignments. So this definitely triggers the supply chain shifts. Okay, so our economies and our countries may shift our focus to other countries other than European Union. So this will show the trade realignments. This will have an impact on the change in the supply chains. And there can be a rise of alternative climate alliances. Definitely we may align with the other countries. European Union may support the climate clubs for carbon pricing. Okay, so European Union may come up with a parallel framework to deal with this particular issue, and BRICS may also build the parallel frameworks to shape the climate governance. Okay, so in order to curb the global north dominance. So what are the alternatives and global equity proposals that we can propose? So the first one is to address this particular legitimate crisis and the legal concerns. Scholars and some of the policy makers are suggesting few solutions for solving this issue. First one is differentiated exemptions. So what they can do is they can carve out for least developing countries and other climate vulnerable economies. So they need to cut down the tariff and they need to provide some exemptions to the countries which are not able to pay the tariffs. Climate finance linkages should be there. So we have to pair CBAM mechanism to increase the grants, to increase the loans, to increase the green climate contributions from the developed nations. What I have told, developed nations need to provide certain kind of loans, grants, and also other kind of financial support to the developing nations, right, in order to adapt to the conditions of green climate or green economy. So CBAM mechanisms needed to be linked to this particular thing. Only if these kind of mechanisms are properly implemented, CBAM needed to be imposed. So these kind of obligations needed to be bought. Capacity building is something which we need to do. So we need to support the developing countries to develop emission accounting frameworks. And WTO need to be a mediator to solve this issue. The WTO-led carbon pricing mechanism, global carbon mechanism needed to be bought. Okay, so instead of having a unilateral decision making, we need to do the multilateral decision making to come up with a multilateral solution under WTO to harmonize the carbon pricing across the borders. Okay, so what are the strengths of this particular thing that I have told you? So this will help in reducing the carbon leakage and to uphold the European Union's ETS integrity and to promote the global green standards, to encourage innovation and eco compliance. It will act as a soft climate diplomacy tool to European Union. But there are certain issues like complex to administer because there are a lot of issues with respect to it. Okay, this is a coercive measures against the global south. Okay, so this will actually deepen the trade inequality and the climate injustice that already there. Okay, it will intensify the already existing issue. Okay, this will risk WTO legal challenge also, and this may lead to multipolar fragmentation. Okay, so these are the weakness and these are the issues with respect to CBAM. So there is a prelims MCQ question that is mentioned over here. If you want, you can solve it. CBAM, which is seen recently in the news, is related to cyber security and global backing. Cross-border taxation of MNCs, carbon taxation on imported goods, dispute mechanism under WTO. So I have already told you this is a carbon border taxation of carbon taxation on imported goods. Okay, so the option C is right. So you may get confused with these MNCs, but this particular issue is not about MNCs. This particular issue is all about imported goods to European Union. So definitely third one will be the right option. You can attempt the question also, the mains question. Carbon border adjustment mechanism reflects the tensions between the climate ambition and the trade justice. Critically examined with the reference of the BRICS opposition and its impact on global climate governance. So basically they are asking CBAM will reflect the tensions between climate ambition and trade justice. So whatever the climate ambitions that we have come up with the Paris Agreement and all, you can need to mention. And you need to also mention about whatever the economic targets that the countries have, individual countries have. You can mention all of them. So there is a clash between these both. So that is something which you need to mention in 1 or 2 points. And then you need to critically examine the reference to the BRICS opposition. Why BRICS nations are opposing. So that is something which you have to mention. I have already told you. And how this CBAM mechanism will have an impact on global climate governance. So for each of them, for each part of this particular question, you need to mention 2 or 3 points. That will be enough. Okay. So you can mention the answer by writing. Okay, by typing in the comment box. So definitely will reply by evaluating it. Okay, or else you can get access of this particular PDF through the Telegram channel. The Telegram channel link will be posted in the comment box. description box, not comment box, description box. You can get the access of the Telegram channel link. So after going into the Telegram channel, so you can mention, so there will be a comment section that is switched on. You can mention your answer and you can post your answer over there if you want. Okay, definitely we'll evaluate. Okay, so thank you everyone. Let's meet in the next class. Until then, take care, bye bye, and don't forget to please subscribe, like and share this video, because your kind of motivation, your kind of support to us definitely will be in this form. Okay, this will motivate us to come up with more such content for you. Thank you everyone.